Welcome to Beginning Beekeeping with Super Bee Rescue. We've got a list of questions to go through and get you set up for your first hive check. There's going to be a couple of tips and tricks in here, secrets that I've learned over the years, and they may apply and help you out even if you've been doing this for decades. Okay, we're going to start out with the bare minimum required to get started in beekeeping. So the basic things that you need to get started in beekeeping is some sort of face protection, a hive tool, and a smoker. And this is, no matter what you're doing in beekeeping, you should at least have those three items. And in each item, there's more layers and more kind of specifics, but to start out, I like it when people have a hive tool of some sort. The classic favorite is about a 9-inch hive tool. This guy is basically a small crowbar, and it's different than most crowbars in that it's got a very sharp end on both sides for cleaning off wax and propolis. There's also the J-hook, which is another method, and it's called that just like honeybees, carpenter bees, bumblebees. Beekeepers, we name things simply, so this one looks like a J, called a J-hook. This one's more for lifting frames out, but you need a hive tool to start. They're cheap. So have more than one because you will lose it constantly and you will spend more time looking for it than anything else you own. All right, secondly, face protection. Most honeybees are super gentle. They don't want to sting, but accidents do happen, and an accident to your face is less fun. So you'll almost always see me wearing a baseball cap. The reason for that is to keep the veil off my face. That's just kind of one of the tips that I've learned. This is what we call one of our go veils. Man Lake sells them. It's just a bug hat. They got them at REI and all over the place. And it's just a boonie hat with a little bit of screening. It's a little bit better once you get better at beekeeping to use this level of protection. I generally recommend people when they're starting out to start out with more instead of less. But this is a kind of a cheap option to get started. Just goes over your head. It doesn't seal, so bees can still get in. So if you're wearing anything like this, you need to be comfortable with getting stung because it does happen. If you're gonna up the protection, one of the things that I wear most often, generally, especially in Southern California where it's hot, is an Ultra Breeze ventilated jacket. So the jacket plus a pair of pants and boots covers you and gives you about 90% protection. You can upgrade to a full suit, but most of the time once you get going, you don't need to. If you start out with more protection when you're not using it, you can use that bee suit as a guest bee suit. So a lot of times I recommend people to buy a little bit big, and then you eventually get what you want. And the better a beekeeper you get, a lot of times you end up wearing less and less. I like goat skin leather gloves versus the cow skin. Or a lot of times I'll wear latex gloves, and latex gloves are not sting proof. The goat skin are pretty good protection, but not 100%. And everything in beekeeping is balancing comfort versus, how much protection you need. And then the last thing is a smoker. And smokers are kind of a big deal. It's one of the skills that as a beginner will give you the most trouble. So we'll go through a couple of smokers, how to light them, and how to keep yourself safe. Okay, so we have two different smokers here. We've got the tall smoker versus the shorter smoker. When you're using a big yard and doing a lot of hives, a taller smoker is better because it holds more fuel, but most people start out with a smaller smoker. When you get your smoker, it's gonna have a bunch of pieces. For example, this is something that most beginners take out, don't know what to do with. This right here is super important. So the way the smoker works is this little shelf goes in on the bottom of the smoker, and it keeps the fuel off the bottom so that when you pump the bellow, the air comes out of the bottom of the bellow and into the bottom of your smoker. If that metal piece isn't in the bottom, then the air that's getting blown in through the bellow is just going into the fuel, and it doesn't actually flow through your smoker. Through there, the fuel is gonna burn, and you're trying to create a light smoke that's gentle and it's not too hot. So as far as what you can burn in your smoker, it's pretty much anything. So I'm gonna go through kind of the way I start my smokers, what I do, and there's as many different ways to do this as there is beekeepers, but there's some basic ideas. So every day when I start, before I've used my smoker at all for the day, I empty out all the stuff in the bottom. All that ash and debris that's on the bottom of your smoker, what'll happen is every time you pump the bellows, you'll just get a bunch of ash coming out of your smoker. And that will slow you down, and over time it'll end up filling all the pores in that bottom piece of metal, and the air won't flow. So from there, you can build it up like a campfire and put a little bit of paper, maybe a little bit of cardboard, and then whatever fuel you're gonna use. And you're not trying to make a roaring fire. Most beginners, I tell them to light their smoker at night and try it and see whether or not they're spitting out a bunch of sparks. If you're finding sparks coming out of your smoker, you're going to cause a fire or a problem or burn the wings off of the bees. So you can do that and build a really nice fire in the bottom. Or another method is to get yourself an inexpensive propane torch. So the nice thing about the propane torch is you don't really have to worry about building a nice fire. It just torches it. So that's what I'm going to do kind of for this method. So I'm going to put in, and what we use is, generally we use horse poop as our fuel. We found it actually has the best smell, which surprises most people. It burns nice and cool, and it stays lit for a long time. Things like pine needles, burlap, cardboard and other stuff generally burn too hot and too fast, and you get too much smoke, but not for a long enough period of time. If you're only checking 1 or 2 hives in a backyard, it doesn't matter as much. The other thing is horse poop's pretty cheap. Another common is burlap sacks, and most people go to like a coffee shop to get that. So once I light my smoker, I'm just going to use the torch, and I'm going to get the material in the bottom to start burning. Once I've got fire going, immediately you can see it goes out, and it's just smoldering in there. And that smoldering is the right setting for that. One thing I want to mention is anytime you have a smoker, you also must have a fire extinguisher. Smokers are fire, and they need to be very carefully used. They shouldn't be used when there's a red flag warning. You should have the area around you weeded. You should have access to potentially water, and just be thinking about fire safety whenever you're using a smoker. Another thing that we use is we have a metal box to contain our smoker. When we're not using it, it goes inside this metal box, and it keeps it from overheating. If you set your metal smoker down and it's smoldering like this in a bunch of grass, it will catch the grass on fire. There has been many very expensive fires that have been started by accidental beekeepers. So just keep that in mind. Okay, so that simple torch that I did for about 20 seconds on this material, which has got a little bit of wood chips and a little bit of dry horse poop in it, has lit it, and now my smoker's going. So to keep it going, a lot of times I'll get it going really nicely, and I only put about 1 inch of material in there. And once I feel like the smoker's going well, and when you are doing this, you need to be in an area where you're not going to start a fire. So right now I'm in a big dirt patch. You can also do it inside your smoker bucket where you've got it rested, especially if you've got one of the smokers with a hook on it. And you just got to constantly think, I don't want to start a forest fire. Backyards, a lot of times people have nice, landscaping, and all that helps. But also keep in mind, after the Thomas fire and other fires, people are a little bit jumpy when they smell smoke. So just make sure kind of your neighbors and people around you know what's going on. So the smoker's going fantastic. This is exactly what I like to see. My smoker's going. A lot of times I'll kind of get it going, let it start, and then I'll start doing other stuff. Once I get it going about this good, I put other material on top. And this is more wood chips and horse poop. Some days it's just wood chips, some days it's more horse poop, some days it's all horse poop. It just depends on kind of what I've got laying around. I'm gonna pump it a little bit to make sure that it keeps going. And what happens is all that material, the fire's at the bottom, and it's going to build from the bottom up. It's gonna smolder. As it smolders, the material will break down and it will lower the level and eventually burn through all of this. But that'll take about an hour to 2 hours. And that's what I'm looking for when I'm doing hive inspections, is that amount of time. Like I said, if you're using pine needles or other things, you're gonna find it going out faster, but you might have more smoke than you actually need. So my smoker's going good now at this point, and what I need to keep in mind is I need to keep an eye on it, and while I'm working, every once in a while, I'll give it a couple of puffs to make sure that it doesn't go out. So once I've got my smoker loaded, I put my lid on the smoker, and now you can see the amount of smoke that's coming out here is really low because of all that material I put on top, and it actually works like a spark arrestor. So I never want to get to the point where my smoker is almost empty, because that's when those sparks will come out. And if you ever play with a smoker at night, you'll see that. So now when I pump my smoker, you can see a good amount of smoke coming out of there. And that light smoke, it's very cool to the touch, and it's not gonna hurt the bees, but my smoker isn't bellowing out and belching smoke, so I'm not breathing it when I'm not using it, and that makes me feel healthier. So that's my smoker, and I'll also show you how to make a smoker using kind of cardboard and more of the slower method. So whenever I'm not using my smoker, it goes into the metal box, and I put it in an area where I'm not gonna kick it over or spill it or cause other issues. All right, another common way people do smokers is they use one of these barbecue lighters with the extender and use cardboard at least to get it started. So cardboard works great. What I like to do is take the cardboard and actually, for the starter, is I rip up the paper, so I separate the different layers of the cardboard and kind of create more airflow. So the air pockets is really what's gonna catch the fire and get it going. So once I do that, I'm gonna light the cardboard, and it's gotta be good and lit. And I kind of let it go. And then you use the bellow to increase the amount of fire. So I let my smoker get really going good. And watch where you're standing. You're standing downwind of the smoker, all the smoke's going in your face. You can stand upwind of it and not wear as much smoke and not smell like a barbecue as bad when you're done. So once I've got the fire going good, and I let my smokers get pretty hot before I do the next step, because I find that a lot of times people are impatient, and getting your smoker going can actually take more time than your hive inspection. So once it's going, same thing as the other method, gonna add a little bit more material. And this is something that I kind of feel like beekeepers should practice when they're getting started, is lighting and playing with your smoker a little bit, not with the bees. So once you do it with the bees, it's game time and you need to be good at it by that point. So I'm slowly adding fuel and I'm pumping the whole time. Because what I'm trying to do is keep those flames going for this first layer, because that's what I did with the torch. Once I've got the flames going pretty good, and the horse poop or burlap or wood chips or whatever actually starts burning, then I can add more material. A lot of people add material, but when they add it, their fire at the bottom's not going good enough, and they actually end up putting their fire out. And that gets really frustrating because you have to dump out all these hot coals and embers out of your smoker and start over. Once you've knocked out your fire, it's really hard to just stick the lighter back in and get it going again. It's almost always better to just start over. So now this little smoker, it takes a lot more pumping because I don't have the torch to get it going. The torch you can actually use if you dump too much fuel and get it to go out, but you never want to light the stuff on top. You want your fire and all your embers to be at the bottom, and then the material stacked on top of that to keep it from going and getting too hot. So now this smoker is going pretty good, and because it has the cardboard in the bottom, you can see the difference in the two smokers. Both are going, both are working, but this one, because it doesn't have the cardboard, isn't gonna have as much smoke as this one. And this one, the littler one that's got more smoke, almost has too much smoke. The canister is gonna be a lot hotter to the touch, so you're more likely to burn yourself, and you and the bees are gonna be breathing a lot more. So it's one of the reasons I like the torch method for the horse poop. It never really gets going, but it never really goes out, and it burns nice and cool. This smoker now, both because it's shorter and it's going faster, it's burning much faster with more smoke, this smoker will go out probably in 15 to 20 minutes, versus this one will last me an hour or two. Then again, when I'm not using my smokers, they go in metal boxes, and I can leave it open. And then when I'm transporting the smoker, the best way to get your smoker to go out is to lay it on its side. And what happens is the smoke can't escape as easily. There's holes in both ends, and the smoker will go out. Another trick that we use often is we go to like Home Depot or a auto parts store and get a bolt that fits nicely into the front here. So with that, you can use your smoker and carry it around. A lot of people, if they've got a smoker they got to use in your car, you have to be careful with that because it can cause all kinds of trouble. Okay, one question I get quite often is, where do you stand in a beehive? You never want to stand in front. So in this beehive, the front's that way. Got powder all over my hands because I was working with diatomaceous earth for the ants. Get it off. The front of the hive is over here. The back of the hive's over there. I'm going to stand to the side or to the back. You never want to stand in front because it's like standing in the front of the 405 expecting not to get hit by a car. It's a losing proposition. Okay, for your beehive, before you get started, you give them a couple puffs of smoke. That's to let the bees know that you're a beekeeper, not a bear. You don't want to be a bear. It's kind of a bad move. So what you're going to do is you're going to give the bees a couple of puffs of smoke on top. Okay? Our beehives, we have sugar syrup, pollen, and oxalic acid mite treatment. There's a lot going on. We're trying to keep the bees healthy and safe. So right now, the ants have decided they really, really like the pollen supplement, and they're also going after the sugar syrup. Bad combination. All right, so when we're checking the hive to get the first frame out, I move the frames over so that I have access. I also set my lid down. The way I set my hives up, I put them on a stand. When I'm working on pallets or on cinder blocks, I always have an area where I can set the lid out of the way. All right. Because if you put your lid down in your way, you're gonna trip over it, and you don't want to trip over it when you're holding 1,000 bees in your hand. All right, so I'm gonna take out the first frame. I always work from the outside in. You can start on the left or the right. So this is a frame of bees. The bees have no interest in me. They've got work to do, and their work doesn't involve stinging me. If I'm nice to them and I use a little bit of smoke, they have other things to do, and I can keep them from getting upset. Okay, so I'm gonna want to look at a couple different areas to show you. So I'm gonna tell the bees that I want an area, and I push them out of the way. So this right here, that shiny stuff, you can see there, that's nectar. And over time, the bees are going to remove the moisture from it, and it's gonna turn into honey. Okay, so inside the hive, the bees eat two different things. The nectar is the carbohydrate, like potatoes, and the pollen is the protein, like steak. And the baby bees need both a combination of protein and nectar. Protein and carbohydrate. So that's the nectar and the pollen the bees collect. All right, so when you're checking inside the cells, you're gonna want to see if there's a queen or eggs. One of the tricks is you can use your cell phone, and if you triple click on it, you will find a setting that is called magnify, and it'll allow you to zoom in. So let me show you an example of using your cell phone to see into the frames and to get a really good idea of what's going on. A lot of people have trouble seeing eggs and larvae. So these larvae here are about 5 or 6 days old. That one's older and it's about to hatch. I'm sorry, it's about to get capped as it grows, and then the bees will cap the larva. So let's look for some eggs, some younger larvae. So here's some younger larvae, and as we go out, the dates change, and we should be able to find some eggs, recently laid eggs. Okay, so before the queen lays an egg, and after 3 or 4 days it hatches out and becomes a larva. So these are the eggs. And if I zoom out, you can see kind of how hard that is to see. And that's one of the issues, is you've got to be able to have either be able to see really well or use technology to help you. So if you use your phone and you do video and you turn on the light, you'll be able to see inside the cells really well. So what you want to see is the egg standing upright. All the bees are getting in our way. Give them a roll up for smoke. So in order to see the eggs really well, you can use your cell phone camera, zoom in, and turn the flashlight on. And what you should see is 1 egg in each cell. If you see multiple eggs in each cell, there's something wrong with the queen, and you might even have a laying worker. It's always nice when the queen makes an appearance, but you can't count on that when you're doing an inspection, so you can look for eggs. So this mass of bees is Her Majesty, and she doesn't like light, so she'll hide from us. So that bee right there is the queen. You can see she's a lot bigger than the workers. Welcome to Beekeeping 101 with Nick with Super Bee Rescue. Okay, so we've got 2 hives here. Both are in Langstroth double deeps with a sugar water feeder on top, and they're sitting on pallets. Pallets are great for commercial beekeepers because it allows you to put lots of bees in an area and move them around when you need to. So these guys have a little bit of ants. Ants are a constant issue, and we use diatomaceous earth to combat the ants. It's kind of the most organic treatment you can use. Another option is to use boric acid and sugar water in a bait station. Other people build stands with tanglefoot and other things like that. So to get started, I smoke the front of the hive. I'm here to let the bees know that I'm a beekeeper, not a bear. I stand to the side of the hive, never in front, because standing in front of the hive is like standing on the freeway expecting not to get hit by a car. It doesn't work. All right, so I'm going to take off the feeders. Get those out of our way. And so I've already smoked the front. I've got my trusty Hive Tool. I'm going to open the top of the hive, and I set the hive lid behind me and out of the way so I'm not stepping on it. Stepping on your hive lid causes you to fall over, and if you have 1,000 bees in your hand, that's going to be a problem. All right. As I'm working, same thing. Anything I take out of the hive, I need to put it in a good safe spot. So a lot of times I'll build a bench to work on the bees, and then I've got a nice spot to work. But in this case, I don't have a bench here, so I'm going to set the hive pieces that I'm not using out of the way. So this is going to go back behind the hive again and out of the way. If it's covered in honey and you leave it out, it's going to cause robbing, other bees to come in and steal it. All right. So I'm going to check and see what's in this top box here. Might have a little bit of nectar. Yep. So this is nectar that's inside. It's nice and shiny. When you look into the cells, you can kind of see that kind of shimmery, shiny look. And that nectar will turn into honey as they dehydrate it. All right, since I'm working 2 hives and I've got the pallets, there's a lot of places I can set this equipment. But for me, when I've got 2 hive boxes, a lot of times I'll just set the second box, the box I take off, onto another hive. All right, so my hives, I've got oxalic acid, which is a mite treatment. Got some pollen patties. I'm gonna get those out of the way. And I'm gonna get into. So again, I've got to take 1 frame out so that I can work the hive. Get it out of the way. I can just set that one. That one's just a frame foundation, so I'll move it out of the way. And I start working my way through the hive. All right, this is a really nice frame. This frame you can see on the top, that's capped honey, and below that, the shiny stuff, that's nectar. As the bees add more nectar and dehydrate it, this whole frame will turn into a capped sheet of honey. Once it's capped, it's ready for harvest. So this frame, you can see the difference between capped honey, which capped honey just looks like a full sheet, versus capped brood, they cap each cell individually. So again, capped brood, each cell is capped individually. It generally has a darker color. Capped honey, on the other hand, they cap a whole sheet. All right, so this frame has the queen on it, right over here. And she's gonna try and run and hide away from us. So whenever you have the queen on a frame that you're working, you just have to be extra careful. So I'm going to carefully put this frame back in. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I've spotted the queen. I'm going to put the frame away from where she is and then slide it over gently so that I don't squish Her Majesty. So these frames have kind of a spotty appearance, more of a shotgun look. You can see that not every frame is capped, and that means the queen and the colony is not doing very well. The more uncapped brood you have, the more cells that are missed, the more of a problem you have. All right, so what I'm trying to do right now is catch a small hive beetle. This right here is a small hive beetle. It's one of the pests inside the hive. And actually the easiest way to deal with them is when you see them is to squish them. They really like pollen patties, and they make little traps so that you can catch them. You don't have to do it by hand, but a colony only will have a few of those. So this colony is suffering from Varroa Mites, and you can see on this bee right here, she's got what we call deformed wing virus. Her wings are all short and kind of shriveled, and that plus like this bee right here has K-wing. That means that these bees are suffering from Varroa mites. So if I look really carefully, I might even be able to see a Varroa mite, but a better way to test is to use a sugar test method, and that's where you take half a cup of bees, you put them in some sugar, you shake them, and then the mites shake out through a screen and you count them. So I'm trying to find us a mite. Just because you can't see mites doesn't mean you don't have mites. It's a common misconception. Beekeepers think, oh, I don't have a mite problem, but when you really do, you just can't see them. Okay, so I only like to have a hive open for a couple of minutes. If I have the hive open for too long, it chills the brood, and those are the baby bees, and it gets too cold, and then those bees actually die. So by keeping your hive open for too long, you are killing bees, not helping them. So you need to plan how long you're going to be doing your hive check, and you need to keep it to a certain amount of time. And if you can't get through the whole hive in that amount of time, you need to come back another day. Okay, so there's another bee with deformed wing virus. Here's another deformed wing. It's not quite as bad, but her wings are just shriveled up. They just never fully develop. Those bees can't fly. That is going to be a tax on the colony itself, and their health is going to suffer. So that is a hive inspection. I checked, I found the queen. If I'm not looking for the queen, I can find just eggs. And then I'm going to shut the colony down and put everything back in the same order that I found it. Okay, when you take apart a hive and you put it back in a different order, unless you have a good reason, you're basically just moving the furniture around, making the bees difficult without helping them. So before you get started, you want to know why you're getting into the hive, what your plan is, and then you implement it as quickly as possible. So a couple of minutes is about good, and what it generally takes to do a hive inspection. In the beginning, it may take you longer, maybe up to 10 minutes per hive, but if you keep them open for, say, 20 minutes, you can actually cause more harm than good. So this colony, I've put it back together in order, and I'm going to give them back their sugar feeder. The sugar feeder is one of the things that we're giving the bees to help them this time of year. There's not enough food for them, and we want them to get strong and healthy. So I like to inspect my hives about once every 2 weeks. Depending on the time of year and how strong your colonies are, you can do a little more, a little less. I don't recommend inspecting more than once a week. Some beginners just want to open their hive every single day, but every time you open the hive, it can set the bees back by a couple of days. They have to redo all the work that you've undone. Okay, so this first top box, I can tell it's not very active, so I don't even need to tear apart that box. I can set it out of the way. So unlike last time where I set it on top, this one I set the lid out of my way, and I'm just going to set the box on top of the lid, upside down, and it gives the least amount of spots for the bees to get squished. Okay, one of the pests that we deal with a lot is ants, and for ants we use diatomaceous earth, boric acid and sugar bait, and we use tanglefoot on stands. So raising your bees up off the ground and putting them on a stand allows you multiple options to protect them. So when I'm doing more of a quicker hive check, I simply remove one of the more center frames. So this hive, we can already tell it's much healthier than the other frame. The other hive, it's got a much better brood pattern, but it's still pretty poor. This is about 80% coverage. How you figure that out is you take a section of the comb and you basically count how many cells are capped versus cells that aren't of the same age. And the more that are capped, the better the bees are. So if you get a full sheet of comb where almost every cell is capped, more like over in this section, this is more like 80, maybe up to 90%, that's better. When you have a more of a shotgun look, the bees are in a lot of trouble. And you really want to look at a frame that's got capped brood. If it's got a bunch of eggs in it, they haven't gone through enough cycles. The frame isn't old enough to actually get a good count. Okay, so inside the box, you'll often find a queen cell. The bees build queen cells, in order to raise up a new queen. And we can tear apart this queen cell and look inside. And if there's no egg in it, then it's basically just a queen cup. They were just having it just in case. You'll find queen cells in your hive all times of the year. Most of the time, if they're up in the upper half, they're a supersedure, meaning they've decided the queen's not very good and they want to replace her. If they're down low, especially hanging off the bottom, those are often swarm cells, meaning your hive wants to swarm. So same thing, give them a little bit of puff of smoke. We don't need to smoke our bees to the point where they can't breathe. The smoke is just to keep them calm. With good, gentle bees, you don't need much smoke, and the bees will tell you. If you've got enough, they will stay nice and calm if you use the right amount. If you use too much, all your bees may take off and run out of your hive. If you use too little, they're likely to be pretty pissy at you. Okay, so I've disassembled and reassembled those hives after looking through them. Got through both hives in less than 15 minutes. Okay, we're gonna go through kind of a lightning round of quick questions that I've got. So I'm gonna sit with the bees. You can watch the bees, you can watch me, but we'll just answer some real quick questions. So, what are the first things that I do when I walk up to a hive? I look at the front door and see how much activity there is. I then stand off to the side and make sure that I've got the bees kind of figured out what my game plan is. Before I touch the hive, I need to know what I'm doing and why. When I look at the hive, I listen to it and see how it sounds. Most of the time, the bees are going to be nice and calm, but if they're not, I need to figure out why and what's going on with them. As soon as I open the hive, the bees are going to make different sounds depending on what's going on. One of the most common things that people find is when they open a hive that's queenless, it'll roar at them. What that is a higher buzzing because they're putting out more nocivo, which is the orientation scent, and they're trying to tell the other bees, they're trying to tell the queen that they've lost, and it could have lost it weeks ago, to come back to the hive. We generally recommend adding a box when 60% of the box that the bees are in is full. I don't want to add it too early, I don't want to add it too late. You add it too early, it's too much space, the bees can't warm it, the bees get too cold, and the baby bees suffer. You add it too late, they've already decided to swarm, it's too late, the bees are going to be taking off on you. There's multiple ways to run your bees. You can run it with 1 deep, 2 deep, 3 deep, 4 deep, 6 deeps, whatever. I generally run 1 deep on the bottom and then go with a queen excluder or separator and honey supers above that. I sometimes do 2 queen excluders, 2 brood boxes on the bottom and then go up. The bigger the beehive is, the more powerful it is, the more energy it has, and the more likely you are to get yourself in trouble. So beginners especially, stay with small colonies. It's better to have more colonies that are smaller than giant ones. How do I know when I need to split my hive? So in the springtime, when the bees are doing really well, your hive's going to build up. And just like I said, beginners, you don't really want a giant colony. One of the ways to avoid that is to split your hive. So if your hive is full, packed full, and it seems like it's about to swarm naturally, you can create an artificial swarm by splitting the colony in half. And I like to do that by taking half the brood, half the honey away to a new location and leaving the other half. I generally take away the queen if I can find her. And you can either introduce a queen to the existing colony, or you can let them raise up their own. Success rate of raising up their own is about 50%. So if you do let them raise up their own, keep an eye on them and make sure that you solve it if there's an issue. Time of day definitely makes a difference. When I'm doing work around the hives, I like to do it early or late in the day when all the bees are in and calm. When I'm working the hives, I like to do it in the middle of the day because most of the bees are out foraging instead of sitting at the front door guarding it. It really does matter where you stand or sit. In my case right now, I'm sitting on the hive. You always want to be to the side or the back. Is it important to see the queen? Do you have to see her every time? Most time in the beginning, beginners are not going to see the queen every time. If you spend your entire time looking for her, you're going to miss out on learning the other things. So I suggest looking for the queen as you're doing your inspection, but most importantly, finding eggs. If you find eggs, you know there was a queen within 3 or 4 days, and that sometimes is as best you get. It doesn't mean that the queen is present, but it does mean if you see eggs, it's a pretty good chance. How much smoke do you use? Don't use that much smoke, and don't burn things that are toxic. plastic, junk, trash. Don't burn that stuff. Newspaper and cardboard generally burns too hot. It's not my favorite. Instead, I like to burn horse poop. You can also use burlap, that works really well. Jute twine works, wood chips can work, but whatever you do, try and have a nice cool smoker. Don't let it get so hot that you're gonna set everything on fire. This is California, remember, your smoker is dangerous. If you crush some bees, does that matter? It absolutely matters. If you crush bees, the other bees around it are gonna get the defensive pheromone, because when the bee stings, it releases a pheromone that tells the bees that they're under attack and they need to defend themselves. So if you're crushing bees, you're releasing that pheromone. Other bees are going to notice and you're going to be in trouble. It's one of those self-teaching lessons. You crush bees, bees sting you, you stop crushing bees. If you only have 2 or 3 frames of bees, you're in big trouble. In the springtime, sometimes the bees can pull that off, come back, and be a roaring success. In the winter, fall, 2 or 3 bees don't have a chance. I like to have my hives about 14 frames a year, 14 frames of bees and honey in September, October, and it's gonna drop down to about 6 frames of bees. Anything less than 6 frames of bees really is in trouble. There are specific steps to opening, investigating, closing your hive, mainly not crushing the bees, doing everything slow is smooth, smooth is fast. You have to be in control. All right, so right now I'm noticing more and more activity. It's getting louder, and that's because there is some robbing going on. That is when the bees find a free lunch and they go after it. So this hive right here, having a tough time defending its honey. So it's causing the buzzing sound in my yard to increase as all these bees think that they're gonna come and steal honey from another hive. So this lid, this Kuiper lid, doesn't have a lip around it, so it doesn't seal quite as good as some of the other lids I have. I'm gonna swap it out real quick. And paying attention to your bees, listening to them, that's that same idea. You can hear them. So I heard them robbing another colony, and that's why I'm gonna go switch. And this lid has a lip on it, and that's gonna make a much better seal. I'm pushing down because this lid will seal better that way. Okay. All right, going back to our lightning round. There is a huge difference between male and female. Most of my hives right now don't have much drone brood. It's starting to get late in the season, and there's not a lot of food. But if it looks like kicked cereal, a nice round top on it, on the cells, that's generally a drone. Drone cells are also bigger than female cells. Female cells are more flat. If you see holes in your brood cappings, a lot of times that means that the bees are being hygienic and cleaning out bees that have mites or other diseases. And the more you see of that, you've got a problem. If you don't see eggs, larvae, or capped brood, is that a problem? Yes, you probably don't have a queen that's functioning. If you do have a queen, she's not working, and generally 2,000 bees are born a day and about 1,500 bees die a day. If those 2,000 bees aren't there to replace the ones that die, your colony's going to be dead in about 4 weeks. My hive was always calm, but when I opened it recently, the bees were aggressive, running all around the frames. Why are they doing that? Most likely, they had a genetic shift. The queen switched over, and you've got some pissy, more defensive, aggressive bees. Another option is the bees have been under attacks by skunks, ants, or something else, weather. The bees will get more defensive. Another thing that happens that most people don't realize is here in Southern California, July and August are real hot. There isn't that much food for the bees, and the bees get more defensive because they don't want to lose what little they have. Should you use a queen excluder? In the beginning, I recommend beekeepers, beginners use a queen excluder so that their hive stays small. If the hive gets too big, it's tougher to control, and a beginner's more likely to get themselves hurt. As you gain experience, taking away the queen excluder is fine. You can make decisions. You can use things such as the flow hive or other stuff. But until you know what you're doing, don't. When I opened my hive, I saw queen cells all over. What does that mean? That generally means that your hive's about to swarm.